I get a DM on Instagram, "Hi Amanda, I'm not sure if you've seen this," with this link to this article calling me a sickfluencer, and then it just derailed my whole week. You have to use a hook, don't you? And as soon as I saw that hook kind of used against me, I realised why I hate that kind of marketing so much. Neurodivergence really is the pawn in the new culture wars. So I would love to see more journalism about the reality of ADHD. The truth is such a boring story, isn't it?
In today's episode, we'll be unpacking a recent article from the Mail Online and other media outlets that has sparked quite a big debate. We're joined by Amanda Perry, one of the influencers mentioned in the article. After being diagnosed with ADHD at 42, Amanda sold her successful digital marketing agency and developed a brain-first business, mentoring ADHD entrepreneurs and consulting on workplace neurodiversity. This episode raises questions around how social media and the press can impact the neurodivergent community. Before we dive in, let me quickly summarize the key points from the article. It talks about the Access to Work program, which supports people with disabilities or conditions like ADHD by helping them with things like specialized equipment or coaching. The article mentions that some people can access up to £69,000 a year through this program. It suggests there's been a significant rise in claims on the quote-unquote disability benefit scheme from self-diagnosed ADHD'ers and attributes this to advice shared by quote-unquote sickfluencers, including Amanda Perry. According to the article, spending on the program has increased by 40% over the past year, now costing £258 million. The Department for Work and Pensions responded, saying that all support provided is carefully vetted. Let's get Amanda's take on these claims. Tell me, Amanda, about the day when this Daily Mail article did pop.
So I woke up that morning to an email from the Mail Online, which was quite weird. And it said, "Hi Amanda, we really love this video. Would you mind if we used it in our players?" So I said, absolutely not, for many reasons, but mainly because the information's out of date and, isn't helpful to anyone. An hour later, maybe, I get a DM on Instagram, "Hi Amanda, I'm not sure if you've seen this," with this link to this article calling me a sickfluencer. And then it just derailed my whole week. It was just bonkers that week.
What is a sickfluencer?
But you tell me. I think they made it up. I think it's like mumpreneur, like solopreneur. Like you can just put fluencer after anything to kind of degrade it, to make it just sound a bit but this is not a word that people call themselves as far as I'm aware. I'd never heard of it before. But the picture that they were trying to paint is that it's people who are online promoting sicknesses, illnesses, disability, promoting it not in a advocacy way, but in a, do you know, if you say this is what you can get. That was the tone of the piece. I think in one bit they said that they were kind of quoting word for word my video saying, the first thing you do when you get ADHD is Google this website. But it really did make it sound like I was saying, right, all you have to do, say you've got ADHD and the government are going to give you 69 grand straight into your bank account. And like, this is what you have to say. Like, tell them this, it really was like my job as a sickfluencer is to spend my time on TikTok teaching people how to claim 70 grand off the government.
So then, and I know you'll obviously know about this, Amanda. So then you're like, okay, I go beneath and I read the facts and you read some of the reports and you get into actually what is going on. Let's start with what is Access to Work.
So Access to Work is a government grant that is for people who fall into the category of disability to get support in work or their business. So the irony of all this was the kind of subtext of the piece was that, these lazy scroungers with ADHD, like this made up ADHD, or let's all roll our eyes. But this is for people who are working. And the kind of 69, 62 grand that's been bandied about, I don't know anyone that's got that. I know people who have got a few £1,000s to pay for coaching. I've worked with people who've paid me through Access to Work. I've never claimed it, but it's there for people who are working, who are building businesses. This isn't a benefit. This is a grant for support, for some noise cancelling headphones or for VA support, things that are genuinely really, really helpful to people with executive functioning issues.
And that's just in putting an ADHD lens on it, right? I mean, originally Access to Work was set up for the deaf and blind community. 30% of that total grant goes towards helping the deaf community. It's not just an ADHD grant for ADHD'ers to then take advantage of. And then you look at the average amount of money that people are claiming, and it's less than £5,000.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not 69, not 62.
No. And I have to hold my hands up for that, because we've discussed this, where TikTok is all, you have to use a hook, don't you? And as soon as I saw that hook kind of used against me, I realised why I hate that kind of marketing so much. So that video did really well, performed really well in terms of metrics on TikTok. But using that hook that kind of gets people to stop, I know, and I said in the video, I don't know anyone that's got this amount of money, but the fact is the grant is up to that amount of money every year. I do kind of kick myself for using that a little bit and hold myself, but that's the whole conversation, isn't it? This is why there's an article, because that then gets the clicks, which gets the ad revenue. And it's the same as me using the hook, which gets people to stop the scroll and listen to what I'm saying. And, it's a wider issue, isn't it?
It is. It's this kind of tension, I guess, between I want people to see this. So what's the best way of getting people to see this? We've got to hook them in.
I know.
How do you, I guess with just your own content, forget that piece and forget the Daily Mail for a second. How do you wrestle with that?
It's really hard, isn't it? I find more recently, I find social media such a trigger. Like, I am incredibly demand avoidant. I find that emotional manipulation on social media really, really difficult to manage. And I think I'm diagnosed with ADHD. I recognise a lot of ASD traits. It's in my family. I've never had a diagnosis or, taken it any further. But I think that there's that kind of demand avoidant PDA part of my brain. I struggle to use hooks because it's just so annoying to me. I just find it so annoying. And I know that that's not playing the social media game, is it? And I know how to play the game, and I have played the game, and I've played it quite well. But when you're talking about the subject matter that we're talking about, it's like, where does it tip from advocacy and awareness into just capitalism? And how am I going to make money out of this? And that's not, I mean, it's complex, isn't it? But I find it a real trigger. And so I try and be guided by what I would want to see, because ultimately they're the people that I would want to work with or be in my community, or, I wouldn't necessarily want the people who are looking for those kind of real hooks or triggers necessarily.
Does the Daily Mail piece remind you of any other pieces? Like, it's not an isolated occasion?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's the exhaustion. There was 2 or 3 things for me. One was that I was caught up in this, and it felt really unfair and very exposing and vulnerable and out of my control. A few people said in my comments, neurodivergence really is the pawn in the new culture wars.
Tell me more about that.
If you talk about it in a space where, like online, where, you have this context collapse where you don't know who's going to access your content. It's just this subject at the moment that is so emotive, even around family, like dinner tables. I speak to people who just can't talk to their family about it, which is so sad. And it's this emotive subject that will just get people arguing. As we saw, I looked at the article today, there's about 650 comments underneath now, which, if that was your post on social, you'd be absolutely delighted with, wouldn't you? And I just thought, it just made my stomach flip just thinking about what people were saying.
So I didn't read all 700 comments, but I read a few. I read enough. And the kind of, there were some general themes coming out. One of them was, I think, a bit of misunderstanding that this access to work wasn't about work and was just about people trying to claim benefits. And the second one was basically saying, hold on a minute, there are people more in need than you. Why are you taking up valuable money, resource, time? There are people who are worse. What do you say to that?
There's a pot of money, and it's not an infinite pot of money, but it's a pot that the government have decided is fair and proportionate for the people who need it. And when I read the article, I know that someone from DWP had commented saying, everyone that applies goes through a rigorous assessment to ensure that they're entitled for this, because they'd obviously said to them, there's these people on TikTok teaching people how to get this money. And he is right. There is a very fair and rigorous process to ensure that the money you're being awarded out of this finite pot of funds is fair and proportionate to the level of support that you need.
I assume that if they've got a backlog of 50,000 applicants, there must be some sort of triage system in place to assess people's needs and the costs of those needs.
Yeah.
I sort of feel like access to work needs a little bit of a, I don't know,
rebrand.
There are too many myths of what people do know about it.
And that was actually, ironically, the point of my video. My TikTok was me saying, we're really quick to bash the government, but actually this is something that is really, really helpful and not enough people know about. We're seeing that on the other end, this kind of waterfall effect where people have perhaps been claiming it for a few years now and are used to this certain level of funding, and then they're going back to renew their funding and it's being, cut in half or a quarter, or they're being much, much more stringent. So I think for anyone concerned that people applying for it is taking it out of the hands of other people who need it, we're taking it out of each other's hands. We're not taking it out of your hands, or it's not coming out of your, we're not taking extra money out of your tax contribution. It's a pot there, and the more people that are claiming from that pot, the less that each person gets.
Yeah.
And who's to say who, the people assessing it are the ones saying who's more deserving and who isn't. I think it's just this, there's this subtext of it's not real. And I shared the piece on LinkedIn and someone actually commented, you make up an illness and claim 60 grand from the government. What utter bullshit. I was like, I said to him, I really hope you don't have a kid one day that needs your support in this area. But it's just crazy to me. I can't think of any other group of people or illness and it's, you don't want to start comparing it to illnesses or other disabilities but I can't think of any other group that is disbelieved in the way that we are.
Why do the traits of ADHD mean it's disbelieved as a neurotype?
I think there's two things. One is because it's things that everyone does. Everyone loses their keys and this is another thing where it comes back to social, where the big accounts, the accounts that do well, they're the things that they talk about because they're so broadly relatable. So losing your keys or being late or being a bit forgetful or,
it's observational comedy.
Exactly.
Right?
Literally. It's these kind of one-liners, these memes that are easily shareable and will grow your account and all of that stuff. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is that the people who get really angry about it are undiagnosed ADHDers, because they genuinely believe that it's made up because everyone feels this, because everyone experiences this. You know, you don't get neurotypical people saying, well, everyone does that. If they've looked at it in any great detail, or if you've got family members are the classic ones, aren't they? Where people are telling their parents they've got ADHD. And the reason I'm telling them is because I really recognize it in them, but it's not a thing. They don't believe it. That, you know, that's a family thing. It's such a classic. My family, we had the same, I just thought that was a family thing. Nope, we're now all diagnosed, you know?
Yes.
I think the reality of it is, what was it, 2008? Like, no adults couldn't be diagnosed in the UK until 2008, which is so relatively recently. I was diagnosed in 2020, and the stats, the kind of graph of diagnosis, it was around then that it really started to hit this kind of peak. So if we're looking at the last 5 years of awareness in the kind of timeline of life, it's such a tiny percentage, isn't it? I really hope that in the next, 5-10 years, we do reach that point where people are more accepting. And I think there'll always be people that aren't, won't there? I think we do have to accept that, because we've all found out so recently. We're so obsessed with it, aren't we?
It's you can't move for it. You can't not see it. And I think specifically with ADHD, you've got brains that are dopamine seeking. You've got brains that are fast and work at pace and have, can go really deep on subjects and have high interests and high focus time. But emotional regulation is a challenge. RSD comes into it as well. And so and a strong sense of moral justice. You're like, these are all the perfect factors and conditions with which to create a storm.
Yeah.
That is medically difficult to pin down, right? It's not, you have a scan and here we go, here are the results. It's not a blood test. It's different for everybody. It makes it really difficult, and it does feel like, ADHD gets in the firing line more than autism or Tourette's or dyslexia and dyscalculia and dyspraxia don't even get a look in.
No.
Right? Because
they're
not topical.
Apparently ADHD is like this quirky, cool thing. On that, the issue that people seem to have is that they think that people are getting a diagnosis because it's cool or because it's a trend. Like, this is the kind of narrative around it at the moment, which just shows such ignorance. People are either on an NHS waiting list for up to 10 years, as we all know, or they're paying £1,000 to a private clinician, and you don't do any of that without spending months, if not years, Googling every single thing. Is it this? Is it that? What is wrong with me? Like, why don't I feel like everyone else? And maybe that's a shortcut now that there is so much more information out there, but the idea that there's people on social media selling this to people, selling this condition to people is just absolutely bonkers. And I think unless you've experienced that sense of getting a diagnosis or having that realization and that utter relief, unless you've experienced that and you've experienced that permission and forgiveness that you can give yourself when you realize that, all those things that you'd felt such shame about and blamed yourself for, there was a reason. There's something, not that you can blame it on, but that you can make sense of it. Yeah. Unless you felt that, I don't think you can understand why it matters so much to people.
Yeah. It reminds me so much of trying to explain to people that having a decent non-alcoholic drink might be a nice choice to have, and being met with fear, anger, being just dismissed as what's the point of that? You don't need that. Why? I mean, that's never going to last. That's never going to sell. that's a fad, and I'm interested in these parallels between things being, dismissed and shut down, then being sort of established and maybe accepted or getting to a point where in some aspects it's cool and trendy.
Yeah.
Like outside looking in, it's just a fascinating, piece or example of like the human psyche.
Yeah.
And then you throw the media into that and their power, tabloids, journalists, people who are writing and commentating on this kind of stuff. It can go one of two ways. And my sense is ADHD is such an easy target.
And I think that's the saddest thing, isn't it? That it's this sense of not only do we have to live with it and make it work for us, find a way to make it work for us, we also have the burden of proving that it's a real thing. And something I've been thinking a lot about recently is I feel like I spend a lot of time talking about the positives, which is great. I always talk about the positives. I always try and look at the positives myself. And I always see it as a positive thing for me. I know it's not for everyone. But I think because we're kind of living with this weight of kind of proving that it's a real thing, it makes light of how hard it is to live with. Or I feel like I make light of just how difficult day-to-day life can feel. And that's a huge masking piece for me. It's hard. Particularly as women, so much of our ADHD is internal. So much of the way we've been socialized and conditioned is to, be good girls and kind of keep it inside. And, it comes out in such different ways. Actually, I feel quite a lot of anger about that I mask so much of how hard it is because there's this constant pressure just to prove that it's even a real thing.
Yeah, because it's trivialized, right? It's minimized and it's not taken seriously.
Yeah. It's either one side or the other, isn't it? It's either, oh, aren't I silly Billy, I've lost my keys again. Yeah. Or it's this, disability where we need to, have these accommodations, and there's not much room for the middle. But for me and a lot of people I know and work with, it's just a reality that you have to deal with. And some days are good and some days are bad. And there certainly are some huge positives for me. I can list off many positives. But there are also some real negatives that I think we're probably doing ourselves a disservice by not talking about, because when we talk about the positives, people love it. When we talk about the negatives, we're victims.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking, can I think of another example where you're explaining to someone, hey, I've got this, and where you wouldn't be believed or where you'd be laughed at. Being autistic is not like an adjective, right? But I can see the reactions when it does come up, or when we're talking about the charity. And I think people are not quite sure how to react.
Yeah, because anything that is invisible just naturally isn't believed.
Yeah. So from the article, it says there's been a big increase in the amount of applicants, and the sickfluencers are driving that. Why do you think more people are applying?
Well, the increase in people's awareness of ADHD, diagnosis, self-diagnosis, self-realization, whatever we want to call it, is up like 200-fold. It's like the stats are absolutely crazy when you look at even just the official stats of diagnosis, let alone people who have realised and are deciding whether to go on a list or, okay with self-realisation. So brilliant. If I've had a small part to play in helping people get more support from the government that they're entitled to, then I am proud of that. I'm really glad that I could play a small part in making their job or their business easier.
Let's just go back to access to work for a second, stats wise. So 2023 to 2024, this is from a gov.uk report. We've got £257.8 million expenditure spent, and that money has gone to 61,630 recipients, which actually, when you then work out what that means from an average payment perspective per person, is actually £4,183 as an average grant. And you need to be going back to work or in work, self-employed, have your own business, etc. This is not like some unemployment benefit thing.
No.
And anyone listening who does know, I would love to know what actual proportion of those people who are being approved are asking for support because of ADHD.
No one knows about it.
Yes.
I feel I made that video because I've been speaking to someone, they had no idea about it, and I assumed everyone knew. That's the reason I made it a few months ago, because people don't know, and like, we deserve support. Those kind of tasks that a VA could do are really difficult, or, you know, noise cancelling headphones could make the difference between someone being in sensory overload or not in their job, or in, you know, and these are people who are like paying their taxes and making money for people, or making money for themselves. And also, you know, the truth is such a boring story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, publish what's on gov.uk.
What would you like to see the community of journalists and editors from the tabloids, if they were here now, what would you like to see from them?
So I would love to see more journalism about the reality of ADHD, and more of a conscious effort to push the fact that it is a real thing and push the truth behind these clickbait headlines. Of course, I would love to see a more balanced and realistic portrayal of ADHD in the news. The only positive that does come out of these stories is that it does provoke a conversation where a lot of people, whether that's, I know Nancy Doyle wrote a piece in Forbes, that was kind of the truth behind this. You did a great post. It does provoke the reality from a lot of people. So I guess there's a positive that comes from it in that sense.
There's an opportunity to respond.
Yeah.
Basically. And however, whether that there should be an opportunity in the first place, right, is another matter. But I feel like, you know, you go back to the adults only since 2008. This is really new. For lots of ADHDers, it's not new because they've gone deep. They understand it all. They're moving on. They're getting on with it.
Yeah.
Whereas the world is waking up to this. And that's important to remember. And I always have to remember that just over 2 years ago, I was one of those, it's only little white boys, ADHD and autism, no chance I'm autistic. Absolutely no way. And so we've got to remember that people are still learning about this. But, you know, and people like Nancy are brilliant. But I don't want Nancy to have to keep writing.
No.
She's so good at it, right? When rubbish comes out, she's straight in there and knocks it down and gives the truth. But we want to get to a point where, as strange as it is, like, ADHD is not interesting.
Yeah.
From a news
It's just a
headline.
fact. It's a neutral thing. It's just, but are we even there with mental health? I don't know. I think we are. I think we're at a level of acceptance, aren't we? But there's still a lot of stigma around mental health, around depression and suicide. And we're at this really unique place where we're the people that are on the front line, aren't we? With our board saying, like, this is a real thing and we're going to spend all day putting out content and having these conversations. And, you know, and part of the thing that drives me with this, I remember seeing, I think it was a TikTok quite early on in my diagnosis. And this girl was crying, saying that she's just had the realization that no future generations will have to go through what our, like, ancestors went through. And it makes me really emotional because I think about, you know, my nan was just a pain in the arse, you know. We'd drive away from our house being like, oh, and then she said this and she said that. And I think I look at her now with so much compassion because she was so clearly neurodivergent. And, you know, generations before that. So that gives me strength and hope, and it makes me feel like what a privilege it is to be living in this micro moment where, yes, it's exhausting, and yes, it feels unfair that the burden's on us, but what a privilege and an honour to be the people that are able to do that, you know, for our previous generations' ancestors.
Yeah, and I've got 3 girls, so yeah, thinking about the future generations. You know, my 5-year-old's just been diagnosed autistic, and I'm sort of with mixed feelings. It's kind of like, oh my God, well, you're going to grow up in a different world. It's not going to be the same as previous generations, and that will be really positive.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there aren't going to be challenges, etc. But there is going to be support, and there is going to be understanding.
And knowing from that age, and knowing that your parents know and are understanding, and you know, if we'd have known when we were 5, you know, all of that heartbreak, misadventure, near-death experiences, we could have, you know, circumnavigated all of it potentially.
It's not taking all this stuff on the chin, right? But as you're talking, it's probably par for the course of getting to a new normal.
Yeah.
That we're going to have some sticks thrown at us.
I think so. I think it's like 0 alcohol drinks, isn't it? What's the saying? First they laugh at you and then they join you and then they want to be you or whatever it is. It's that, isn't it? You know, people would have said, well, why would I buy I'll just have water or, you know, Coke or whatever. And that's how long have you been on that journey trying to convince people?
You know, that's over 10 years now, and still it's not. 10 years is not a long time, but then it is also quite a long time.
It is when you're trying to build a business. It's a really long time.
That's my only reference point, although it's completely different, obviously, from how people's brains work. There are so many similarities I find in like stigma, stereotype, taboo, changing perspectives, changing behavior.
I think it's the same in the sense of changing the collective consciousness. People don't like change, you know, and there's a lot of change going on at the moment. And now we're saying, oh, there's this other thing that a lot of people have got, and it's taking up NHS resources. And I think it is that fear of change, isn't it? The same as introducing 0% alcohol. You know, maybe it is 10 years.
I think all I know from, you know, people changing the way they drink is you're always going to have the minority. You're always going to have the naysayers. You're always going to have those. And I think certainly with the hidden 20% and what we're trying to do, all we want to do is try and be part of getting the majority.
Yeah.
And just getting to that tipping point that goes beyond where articles like the one that featured you they're just not a thing.
Yeah.
They're not interesting.
Something that will be clickbait.
No.
Because no one's bothered.
Exactly.
Yeah. Boring.
Yeah. That's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Because people like you and I and all the other people who have been diagnosed and really care about this stuff and really want to make change, we're a stubborn bunch.
Yeah.
We are going to get more understanding, and we are going to get, we're not going to see headlines like ADHD is trendy or why is everyone suddenly ADHD, or that is all going to disappear.
Yeah.
And
because you don't see that about stress or depression anymore, do you? Whereas at one time you would, because you know that people would be like, people banging on about this mental health again, you know, that wasn't a thing in my day. It's literally following the same pattern.
Yeah.
So I do think we'll see that day. You can only look after your side of the street, can't you? as hard as that is for us to accept, because we want control of everything.
Yep.
You really can only look after your little bit. As long as I can look after my little bit, and where I f*** up, I admit that I f***ed up. And, you know, that happens in my content. I've said a lot of things that upset a lot of people. Some of it I stand by, some of it I think, oh, that was a bit too far, or, you know, and I'll apologise for it. And I think if we can all fight our own corner in our own way to the people that we attract, then we're doing our bit, aren't we?
Yeah. I'm getting a bit concerned about the sort of, neuro-linguistic police, as the NLP politely, affectionately called them. And it's not really about, sometimes I might say I'm ADHD, sometimes I might say I have ADHD. Yeah. I would hate to, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I know, and we hear this from, you know, our community, that, God, what do you say?
Yeah.
And how do you talk about this? And don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
And that's the complexity of advocating or being someone on social media, where there is this context collapse, where you don't know who's going to receive your content and how they're going to receive it. And it's that battle or that conflict between wanting to get your message out there and wanting to help more people, whether that's with your free content or with your services or whatever it might be, and also keeping yourself safe in that space. And I think that's where we haven't even touched on this bit, but there's the exhaustion of proving that it's a real thing to the people who don't believe it. And then, as you've just said, the exhaustion of out ADHDing each other in the comments, like this, I experience it like this. Oh, well, you're lucky because I've got it like this. And it's not, you're not ADHD, you have ADHD, and ADHD, I hate ADHD. Like, it's just exhausting, isn't it? I don't know if I've just got quite thick skin to it, because in the beginning it did used to really bother me.
Okay.
My one, I think we've all got a specific one, haven't we? As soon as I mention object permanence, people just love to pick me up on that.
Give me an example.
So if I talk about object permanence in any of my content, if I say, you know, one of the things about ADHD is object permanence, for example, you have a toastie every day of your, you know, for 3 months, and then someone puts the toasty machine away and you never have one again in your life, you know, you've forgotten it's a thing. Actually, that's not object permanence. Object permanence is developmental milestone for children, is the idea that things can still exist even though you can't see them.
Yes.
So I'm
like parents and stuff for children.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was Googling what people were saying, and someone was saying about it being, it's colloquially used. So I started using that phrasing. I said, we colloquially use object permanence. So someone said, I said this a few weeks ago, and someone said in the comments, actually, object permanence isn't a colloquial term. It's a developmental milestone for children, which I thought, you can't win. As long as you're authentic to your cause, I think the people that get picked up and potentially cancelled are the ones who get carried away with the kind of metrics and other objectives. And I think that's where it can be slightly dangerous.
It's motives, isn't it?
It is.
I do. Again, I see this in non-alc, right? There are loads of different reasons people start businesses, and there are loads of different reasons why people create content. And some of those are really well-meaning, the right intent and genuine, and some of those aren't. And I think that's, I guess, the way of the world for lots of different areas. But yeah, the kind of the policing, I'm always amazed how exclusive the neurodivergent community feels.
Yeah.
When the irony is that all it wants to do is actually belong and be accepted.
Yeah. My thoughts on that would be, you know, we're a funny bunch, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
We're a funny bunch with high sensitivities, poor emotional control, poor mood control, we're very sensitive. We can be best friends with someone one day and then completely forget they exist, and that apparently upsets people.
Yes.
It's a really difficult one to kind of dictate, isn't it? I don't think there's a solution. Maybe it's about picking a bit from all of these things, and doing what's right. I feel like the way that I spread my services and the amount of free stuff I put out there, I'm really doing my bit. And obviously you are, and so many of us are. And I think if you can say that, then that is how it spreads, isn't it?
I think that's part of the service and part of having the conversation and part of kind of, I guess, putting the spotlight in the nice way and exposing what's going on. And I'm just sort of sitting here thinking, actually, it is quite helpful. Ironic. I'm getting to like no, thanks to the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
Because we need to keep sadly being given these opportunities to explain and educate, break down the facts. And so these slithers and these siloed, isolated occasions can happen. And I don't care if we have to do that like one person by one person.
Yeah, newspapers, rags of that ilk do have a massive platform.
Yeah.
And if we were having the conversation without piggybacking onto or rebutting what they've put out there, it wouldn't break through in the same way. To actually tell the people who we can make a difference to and do care and are prepared to listen, we then have a chance to tell them our version of the truth.
I'm kind of going, I've learned more about access to work.
Yeah.
And hopefully people now who are listening will know about access to work as well, because it is an amazing thing. It's there, it's genuine, it's real.
Yeah.
It can be helpful.
Yeah.
And it's not some scheme or some scam for people to go and take advantage.
No.
It's a proper thing. So let these guys do what they're going to do, right?
Maybe that's the only conclusion we can come to. Because from a personal point of view, on the day, that all of last week, the messages that I was getting, it was either, oh my God, I didn't know that existed, thank you so much. Or it was these messages of, I can't believe this happened to you. People basically saying like, your content's helped me so much and I wouldn't have got my diagnosis if it wasn't for you, which was a huge positive, gave me such a lift at a time when...
And that's the thing to trust in, the good bit of our sense of moral justice kicking in and the self-policing bit. And, that bit is, I think, can be quite loud.
Yeah. By having these conversations and being able to open this up, we can show the reality of that, and the fact that just because we're the ones out there having the conversations doesn't mean we've got it all figured out.
Yep.
It's new for us as well. I talk about being brain first, and that won't look the same for me as it looks for you. But unless we know what that is,
yes,
nothing we do is going to work. And I believe that's true for everyone, but particularly people with ADHD. And I think the whole concept of business and business standards being neurotypical standards, we live in a neurotypical centric world, don't we? And that is the other thing that really has to change over the next, 5 or 10 years. It has to. Yeah.
I can't wait to close the hidden 20%.
Yeah.
That is, my team are going to be in there going,
what? Hang on a minute.
Hey, what? No, they know. I can't.
Yeah, so there's no longer a need for it.
I can't wait to not talk about this.
Yeah, I know. I
can't wait to close the hidden 20%, and that's the goal. We don't need to sit here and talk about this anymore.
What would that be though? How would you know when that time has come? What would have changed?
When 94% of kids who are autistic are not bullied at school, or when 40% of neurodivergent adults are not unemployed, or when 85% of kids who are diagnosed dyslexic are not ashamed of it, or when suicide is not the second leading cause of death for autistics. When those numbers come down, that is a huge marker for us and for society that the impact of all the people doing wonderful work to educate society and make change is materially happening.
But you'll know how far away from that we are with 3 kids in the school system. I've got a 2-year-old toddler who is not in the school system yet and actually he's adopted, so doesn't show any signs of neurodivergence at the moment, although his biological mum is autistic. But I think having kids just puts such a different, it puts different perspective on everything, doesn't it? But a different perspective on, I can imagine for you there will be that microscope of, is the hidden 20% needed anymore? Has change happened? And a lot of that will look like how your daughters are progressing in the world and are growing up in the world.
And when 94% of kids in schools who are autistic are not being bullied, including, my daughter, that she's not being bullied, but I don't want her to be in that 94%. And so it's not just our own measurements. It's kind of like you can see whether it's prison, whether it's suicide, unemployment. Like when these numbers start to improve, then like happy days. When there isn't a waiting list, for assessments. And these are all like achievable. These are all things that will happen like, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And that does take time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Media's powerful and reaches pretty much everywhere. And so, these guys can keep writing their articles. We can keep chatting about them. Nancy can keep writing about, do you know what I mean?
I do think that's not the attitude I came in with, but I actually think that's the conclusion I've come to, which feels really good, that despite their intention behind the article and despite what they think that they're doing, what they actually do is galvanize the people included who care about this stuff so much more, and they actually give us a focal point and a bit of a springboard. We can piggyback on their hard work and to get our message out, to express our own view on it. So maybe we do need to thank them.
A green light badge for you.
Thank you.
Who are you going to give your other green light badge to?
Well, I was going to give it to the collective of tabloid editors and journalists, editors in particular, let's be honest. But now we've come to that conclusion, I don't know. Maybe I still give it to them, but I give it to them out of gratitude rather than spite or anger.
Love that. I'll take it. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you so much.